concept assembly line, where ideas get to work. There is a moment every winter when electric vehicles stop being abstractions and start revealing who built them with intention. It usually happens on an unremarkable weekday morning, the kind where the clock moves faster than your hands and routine becomes the only defense against disorder. The air outside is brittle, the kind of cold that makes sounds seem sharper than usual. The car sitting in the driveway is cold soaked through, its battery and cabin the same temperature as the asphalt beneath it. And you learn very quickly whether the manufacturer understands what winter actually demands. This winter arrived with an experiment baked into it. Not a laboratory-grade test, but the kind that forms naturally within ordinary life. 2 electric vehicles, a shared piece of infrastructure, a predictable set of morning miles repeated across days and temperatures, a household rhythm that can expose the subtle choreography between machine, software, climate, and expectation. It was the sort of setting in which most people never bother to look closely. But concept assembly line is built on the idea that systems reveal themselves best during ordinary use. So when the temperature dropped into the teens and the thermometer refused to climb, the test began whether we planned it or not. The Honda Prologue and the Hyundai Ioniq 9 share a driveway and a mission, but they do not share a philosophy. You can feel that before you ever turn a wheel. The Ioniq approaches winter like a seasoned traveler. Warm the cabin early, stabilize the battery overnight, communicate with the app instantly, and greet the morning with consistency. The Prologue approaches winter like a tourist who packed for spring because the brochure looked sunny. It is capable, it is comfortable, but it is not prepared in the deeper systemic sense, and winter does not forgive hesitation. The real revelation of the past week was how sharply the gap widens when the temperature falls. On the coldest morning, the Prologue began the day at 17 degrees with a pack that had fully absorbed the night. In theory, this should not have been the situation. The car was plugged in. It had a scheduled preconditioning routine set. The instructions were clear, yet nothing happened. The scheduling logic simply failed to trigger, refusing to behave exactly when it was needed most. A familiar pattern had already begun to emerge. Honda's preconditioning system on paper is sufficient. In practice, it is unreliable enough to collapse the entire advantage of the feature. Without preconditioning, the Prologue needed to heat the battery, heat the cabin, and overcome the density of frigid air using only onboard energy. There is no steering wheel heater to lighten the HVAC load, no redundant comfort systems to lean on. The result was predictable and immediate. The efficiency plunged. A short morning route that typically lands somewhere between 3 and 3.3 miles per kilowatt-hour dropped nearly to parity with miles driven. 1 mile of range for 1 mile of road. For most EV owners in northern climates, this is not a theoretical outcome. It is the lived reality of software that cannot be trusted to execute a simple recurring task. Yet even in this failure, something useful appeared. A cold-soaked baseline is valuable in a way a controlled test can never be. It reveals the harshest edge of a system's vulnerability. The Prologue's vulnerability is not the battery, or the motor, or the inverter. Those are GM Ultium components, and they behave as expected. The vulnerability is the decision tree. The software behaves like a series of disconnected options rather than a unified thermal strategy. A driver should never have to guess whether preconditioning happened. A driver should never have to manually intervene in a system designed expressly to remove friction from daily use. In cold weather, Unpredictability is inefficiency, and inefficiency is discomfort. The Ioniq 9, running the same route under similar temperatures, told a different story without needing to try. It preconditioned exactly on schedule. It heated its cabin quickly and predictably. It leaned on its heated steering wheel and seat warmers to reduce HVAC demand. It communicated with the app instantly, with no failed commands and no mystery gaps. And it delivered efficiency numbers that would have been unremarkable in May, let alone December. The difference was not in the motors or the chemistry. The difference was in the philosophy of the software. Hyundai treats climate and battery management not as amenities, but as core infrastructure. Honda treats them like accessories, layered onto a propulsion platform. And winter reveals the consequences of those decisions. But the story does not end with the vehicles. The final layer of this experiment unfolded quietly on the roof. Solar behaves differently in winter than most people realize. Cold air sharpens panel efficiency in a way heat cannot. Under a clear sky at 16 degrees, the 21.5 kilowatt system produced power with a crispness normally reserved for April. The morning sun hit the array and the numbers climbed sharply even as the driveway remained frozen. And something important happened in that moment. The household was using more electricity to warm an EV in winter, yet the panels were producing more electricity than they would on a warm day. Nature inverted its own inconvenience. This created an unexpected reciprocity. Winter punishes the battery, but boosts the solar. The EV consumes more energy per mile, but the roof feeds the home more freely. The short morning route becomes less of an efficiency puzzle and more of an energy choreography. The cold air that drains range is the same cold air that increases yield. And once you see that dynamic clearly, winter stops being a liability and becomes a kind of partnership between technologies that were never designed to speak to each other, but nonetheless speak fluently in practice. That harmony is something the vehicles themselves do not perfectly achieve. The Ioniq 9 and the Prologue sit a few feet apart, drawing from the same infrastructure, sharing the same climate, yet their internal architectures respond to winter with completely different personalities. One is a system. One is an assemblage. Only one of them behaves like it understands that reliability is not a feature, but a foundation. This is the quiet truth behind the numbers. The Prologue is not a bad EV. It is simply unfinished in the ways that matter most for daily life. A vehicle with solid hardware can still feel immature when the software does not show up on time. Winter amplifies every flaw in the orchestration layer, every failure to preheat, every app delay, every decision point that does not adapt to context, and every gap in the interface between driver intent and vehicle response. The Ioniq 9 demonstrates what an EV feels like when the systems that manage comfort, efficiency, and thermal stability communicate with each other cleanly. It earns its efficiency not through magic, but through consistency. On a cold morning, consistency is a source of comfort in its own right. For the household, the takeaway is simple, but powerful. Solar and EVs form an ecosystem whether or not the manufacturer designed them that way. Winter reveals this more clearly than any other season. The inefficiency of the battery is offset by the efficiency of the panels. The stability of the sun complements the instability of the car's software. And the recurring chore of a school drop-off becomes a data-rich ritual that exposes where the system bends and where it holds. This week of sub-freezing mornings did not just produce charts or numbers. It produced clarity. The Prologue is priced where it is because the software stack cannot yet justify a premium. The Ioniq 9, meanwhile, feels like a future that has already arrived. And the solar array reminded us that the cold can serve as an ally as much as an adversary. Winter driving is often framed as a challenge for EVs, but the truth is more interesting. Winter is a diagnostic. It reveals who understands that an electric vehicle is not just a machine, but a system. It shows which manufacturers have learned that comfort and efficiency are inseparable. It exposes whether the software understands the physics as well as the hardware does. And it makes visible, in a single glance at a morning dashboard, whether the car you drive is working for you or merely working around itself. In that sense, this wasn't a comparison between two cars. It was a comparison between two philosophies. One treats winter as an edge case. The other treats it as the baseline. Only one of those approaches feels like the future. And when the thermometer drops into the teens, the future becomes unmistakably clear. Please subscribe to help keep the content coming. It costs you nothing but makes all the difference.